In 1995, Japan was just one step away from overtaking the United States. Its economy had soared from post-war rubble to global dominance. Tokyo's skyline glittered like a vision of the future, and many believed the future was Japan. But then, the miracle stopped. The unstoppable engine of growth fell silent. Today, Japan, once thought to be the world's next economic superpower, is being overtaken by India. Its wages haven't grown in 30 years, its cities are shrinking, its population is aging faster than anywhere else on Earth. So what happened? How did the richest, most innovative nation in Asia become trapped in a cycle of deflation, debt and denial? This is not Japan's story. It's a warning for the rest of us of what happens when progress slows, when a society becomes too comfortable to change, and when even success becomes a burden. Because every nation dreams of reaching the top, but few ever ask what happens after you get there. Today, we're exploring why Japan's economy never recovered and why it is unlikely to ever reach the same heights. When World War II ended in 1945, Japan lay in ruins. Its cities were flattened, industries destroyed, and its economy was barely functioning. Yet from that devastation came one of the greatest recoveries in human history. A transformation so fast and so complete that economists still call it the Japanese miracle. Within just a few years, Japan began rebuilding not only its infrastructure but also its identity. The American occupation introduced economic reforms, while Japanese workers, driven by discipline and collective purpose, rebuilt factories from the ground up. By the 1950s, Japan had already become a key manufacturing hub for Asia. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, Japan's model was simple but brilliant. Export-led growth. The nation focused on producing high-quality goods for global markets, cars, electronics and machinery, while keeping imports limited. Each yen earned from exports was reinvested into better technology and education, creating a cycle of innovation that seemed unstoppable. In just 40 years, Japan's gross domestic product rose by over 6,000%. A country that produced roughly $47 billion worth of goods in 1960 was generating more than $3 trillion by 1990. Factories that once made cheap toys were now producing precision electronics. Toyota, Nissan and Honda revolutionized the global automobile industry. Sony and Panasonic became household names from London to Los Angeles. And in 1964, the launch of the Shinkansen, the bullet train, symbolized Japan's new identity. Fast, efficient and futuristic. By the 1980s, Japanese innovation was everywhere. The Sony Walkman changed how the world listened to music. Toshiba, Canon and Fujitsu were redefining technology itself. Japanese management methods like Kaizen, continuous improvement, became the gold standard in factories around the world. The results were staggering. By 1989, 15 of the world's 20 largest corporations were Japanese. At that time, the phrase "made in Japan" commanded a premium. It meant the best. Japan had become the second largest economy on Earth, and many believed it was only a matter of time before it overtook the United States itself. Tokyo's skyline glowed with neon light, a symbol of ambition and confidence. The future, it seemed, spoke Japanese. But that confidence, that absolute belief that Japan's rise was unstoppable, would soon become the seed of its downfall. By the early 1980s, Japan had become an unstoppable economic force. Its cars dominated American highways, its electronics filled every US living room, and its trade surplus with the United States was growing larger every year. For Washington, this was a political nightmare. American factories were closing, unemployment was rising, and voters were angry. Politicians blamed Japan. The US trade deficit had exploded, while Japan's surplus reached record highs. It wasn't just numbers on paper, it felt like America was losing its edge. By 1985, the situation reached a breaking point. To restore balance, the US proposed a bold and risky idea: force the dollar's value down. On September 22, 1985, finance ministers from the world's 5 biggest economies, the United States, Japan, West Germany, France and the United Kingdom, met at the Plaza Hotel in New York City. Their goal was to sign an agreement that would deliberately weaken the US dollar while strengthening other currencies, especially the Japanese yen. It would be known as the Plaza Accord. To the US, this was a way to make American exports cheaper and more competitive again. For Japan, it was a ticking time bomb. The agreement meant the yen's value would soar, and it did, fast. In less than 2 years, the yen appreciated by over 50%. To understand how extreme that is, imagine if your country's currency suddenly became twice as expensive overnight. Every product you export instantly costs double to foreign buyers. That's exactly what happened to Japan. The effect was immediate. Japan's exports collapsed. In 1984, export growth was a strong plus 15%. But a year later, it fell to plus 5%, and by 1986, it plunged to minus 5%. Factories that had once been symbols of success were now struggling to stay open. Global demand for Japanese goods sank, while companies faced shrinking profits and layoffs. Tokyo's policymakers were terrified. For an economy built almost entirely on exports, a strong yen was a disaster. Something had to be done to keep the system alive. The Bank of Japan responded with drastic action. Interest rates were slashed from over 5% in 1985 to just 2.5% by 1987. The idea was simple: make borrowing cheap, encourage businesses to invest, and push consumers to spend again. It worked. At first, money flowed freely, banks lent aggressively, and investors poured cash into real estate and stocks. But this easy money came with a hidden cost. Cheap loans encouraged speculation on a massive scale. Asset prices began to rise faster than ever before, and everyone from large corporations to small investors believed the boom would never end. The Plaza Accord had achieved its goal for America. The dollar weakened, exports rose, and political pressure eased. But for Japan, it had set off an unstoppable chain reaction. The export engine that built the nation had seized up. The new fuel, cheap credit, was far more dangerous. To fix America's problem, Japan paid the price. The weapon wasn't war, it was the yen. By the late 1980s, Japan wasn't just wealthy, it was euphoric. Real estate prices skyrocketed to levels that defied logic. A single square metre of land in Tokyo's Ginza district could sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars. The total value of Tokyo's real estate became greater than that of the entire United States. Let that sink in. Imagine one city being worth more than all American property combined. That was Tokyo in 1989. Land wasn't just an investment anymore, it became a symbol of status, a guarantee of power. Even golf club memberships, yes, golf clubs, turned into luxury assets. Memberships at elite courses cost up to $1 million each, and people traded them like stocks. Owning a spot on a golf course became a sign that you had made it in Japan's new golden age. The same story unfolded in the stock market. The Nikkei 225, Japan's main stock index, tripled in just 4 years. From around 13,000 points in 1985, it soared past 38,000 by the end of 1989, an all-time record that Japan has still not surpassed, even 35 years later. The world admired and feared Japanese wealth, but it was all built on air, an illusion of infinite growth. The stock prices, the real estate, the million-dollar golf memberships. They weren't signs of stability, but symptoms of a system high on its own success. And like every illusion, it had to end. When the bubble finally burst, property values collapsed. The stock market imploded, and confidence evaporated almost overnight. But what Japan lost wasn't just money, it lost belief. And what came next wasn't one lost decade, but 3. When Japan's bubble finally burst in 1990, it didn't sound like an explosion. It was more like the slow hiss of air leaving a balloon. Prices fell, optimism vanished, and a once unstoppable economy drifted into silence. At first, people thought the downturn would be just temporary, but the months turned into years and then into decades. Japan entered what economists would later call the lost decades. From the early 1990s to the 2010s, Japan's economy barely moved. Its GDP growth averaged less than 1% a year, a stunning fall for a country that once grew faster than any other major economy. Deflation, falling prices became the new normal, and while that might sound good at first, it created a dangerous cycle. When prices fall every year, people wait to buy, companies stop investing, wages freeze, the economy stands still. Factories that once hummed with life grew quiet. Real estate values collapsed and never truly recovered. Corporations that had been global titans in the 1980s suddenly struggled to compete. Toyota, Sony, Panasonic, once symbols of Japan's perfection, became cautious, slow to change, and burdened with debt. The banks that financed the bubble were drowning in bad loans. Instead of letting them fail, the government stepped in, rescuing them with cheap credit and bailouts. Economists began calling them zombie banks. They were alive on paper, but dead in spirit. The same logic applied to corporations. Many unprofitable companies were kept alive just to avoid mass layoffs. The result was an economy that looked alive, but wasn't truly growing. Economists argued for decades about what went wrong. Keynesians blamed weak demand, saying the government didn't spend enough to revive the economy. Monetarists said that Japan didn't inject enough money into its system to spark inflation. Both sides tried their fixes. Neither worked. To fight deflation, the Bank of Japan cut interest rates to nearly zero and kept them there. When that wasn't enough, they invented something the world had never seen before: quantitative easing, or QE. The central bank began printing money and buying government bonds to flood the economy with liquidity. It was a radical experiment, one that Europe and the US would later copy during their own crises. But for Japan, even that wasn't enough. Inflation stayed near zero, wages stagnated, growth barely flickered. Outside Japan, the world moved on. China rose, technology boomed elsewhere, and yet Japan, the nation that once represented the future, seemed frozen in time. By the end of the 2010s, Japan's streets were clean, its trains still ran on time, and life remained peaceful. But the energy was gone. The miracle had become routine. The ambition had turned into endurance. Japan became the first modern country to grow old, and then stop growing. Maybe by now you can already see why Japan never truly recovered. But what's even more terrifying is that every prediction says it never will. And here's why. Japan is running out of people. Not metaphorically, physically. Its population is shrinking fast. The median age is now 48 years old, one of the highest in the world. That means half the country is already approaching retirement. And it's not just age. The fertility rate, the average number of children per woman, is just 1.4, far below the replacement level of 2.1 needed to keep a population stable. In some rural areas, it's even lower. The result? Japan's population, once 127 million, is falling every single year. By 2050, it's projected to drop below 80 million. That's like losing the entire population of England in one generation. And this isn't just about numbers. Every person who disappears takes their productivity, creativity, and economic contribution with them. Imagine trying to run a business when your customer base and your workforce are both vanishing. That's Japan's reality. The working age population, those between 15 and 64, is collapsing. It's shrinking faster than any other major economy. Meanwhile, the number of retirees keeps growing, creating a massive burden on the country's pension and healthcare systems. To sustain the system, fewer workers now must support more elderly citizens. In 1990, there were 5 workers per retiree. By 2050, there will be just 2. Most countries facing population decline turn to immigration, but Japan has chosen a different path. The country remains one of the most closed societies in the developed world. Less than 3% of its residents are foreign-born. Cultural resistance plays a big part. For many Japanese, national identity is deeply tied to homogeneity, the idea of a shared language, history, and culture. Immigration is seen not as a solution, but as a threat to that balance. Because of this, Japan's aging crisis has no demographic escape hatch. Villages across the countryside are vanishing. Schools closed due to lack of children to attend them. Entire towns are turning into ghost cities. In many places, there's a haunting new question painted on banners or spoken by the elderly. Who will look after our graves? This is the human side of Japan's collapse. Quiet, invisible, irreversible. Unfortunately, Japan isn't just aging, it's fading. Every year, fewer births, fewer workers, fewer voices. And without people, there can be no growth, and clearly no recovery. The next reason many believe Japan will never return to its former glory is because Japan refuses to change. For decades, Japan's greatest strength has been its discipline, a culture built on perfection, precision, and respect. But that same perfectionism has now become its biggest weakness. In Japan, the fear of failure is stronger than the desire to succeed. From childhood, people are taught that mistakes bring shame. So instead of trying and failing, many people simply never try. That mindset has all but killed entrepreneurship. While the US celebrates the risk taker who fails 3 times before success, Japan celebrates the man who never took a risk at all. The result? Fewer startups, fewer innovators, fewer dreamers. This cultural caution is reinforced by Japan's tradition of lifetime employment. It sounds noble, loyalty between worker and company, but in reality it locks people into the same job for life, discouraging mobility and innovation, and companies keep employees even when there's no real work for them, just to maintain harmony. Japan's employment rate of 87% might sound like a miracle, but here's the truth. Many of those jobs exist only on paper. Productivity per worker has been falling for years. Too many people doing busy work instead of productive work. And for anyone trying to start a business, Japan's bureaucracy is legendary. Endless paperwork, stamps, approvals, it's a maze designed to weigh you down. The World Bank ranks Japan just 29th globally for ease of doing business, far behind places like Singapore or South Korea. Even language becomes a barrier. Only about 8% of Japanese people speak English fluently, making global cooperation and foreign investment far harder than it should be. And then there's the ceremonial employment at the top. Japan is famous for creating government jobs for retired officials, positions that exist mostly to keep old elites employed. From traffic lectures run by ex-cops to ceremonial committees that decide nothing, the system keeps people working, but not producing. It's like watching an economy where everyone is busy, but nothing is actually moving. Japan once revolutionized the world with its discipline, but now that same discipline has turned into a cage. Rules have replaced ideas, stability has replaced ambition. The same discipline that built Japan now traps it in amber. There's another reason Japan can't turn back, and this one hides behind polite government speeches and clean statistics. Simply said, Japan is drowning in debt. Today, Japan's national debt exceeds 240% of its GDP, the highest in the world. That's more than double the US ratio, and nearly 10 times what economists once considered safe. It didn't happen overnight. As we already mentioned, for decades, every time the economy stalled, the government solution was the same. Borrow more money and spend. Stimulus packages, infrastructure, subsidies, bailouts. At first it worked. Roads were built, cities modernised, and jobs were saved. But as the years passed, these projects began to look less like progress and more like painkillers. And here's where it gets stranger. Nearly half of Japan's government debt is owned not by foreign investors, but by Japan itself. The Bank of Japan, the country's central bank, has been buying out government bonds for years, essentially printing money to fund the state. Imagine owing money to yourself. That's the illusion keeping Japan's system alive. For over 20 years, Japan has kept interest rates near zero to make this debt manageable. It became the first major economy to experiment with negative rates, paying people to borrow, punishing them to save. And now that era is ending. Inflation is finally creeping back. Rates are rising, slowly but steadily. And when interest rates rise, something terrifying happens. The cost of serving that enormous debt begins to explode. Every 1% increase in rates could add tens of billions of dollars in new interest payments. That's money that must come from higher taxes, deeper cuts, or even more borrowing. A fiscal time bomb ticking under Tokyo. And rather than reforming the system, Japan has chosen to sustain it. Every crisis is met with another bandage, more bonds, more spending, more delay. Deflation made consumers cautious. Aging made spending weaker. Instead of fixing those issues, Japan's policymakers choose to tranquilize them with zero rates and infinite debt. It's not a recovery plan, it's an anesthetic. Japan's economy isn't healing, it's being kept asleep. Practically, Japan isn't fixing its problems, it's just buying time. So where does this story end? Can a nation that once built the future find one again? Japan stands at crossroads. Its past was a miracle, its present a warning, and its future uncertain. The Japan of today is both a marvel and a mirror, a glimpse of what happens when innovation slows, when comfort becomes paralysis, when progress turns into nostalgia. And maybe that's what makes it so important, because Japan's struggle isn't only Japan's story anymore, it's everyone's. Across the world, populations are aging, debt is rising, young people are losing faith in the promise of growth. In many ways, the world is quietly following Japan's steps, and so the question isn't whether Japan will recover, but whether anyone else can avoid its fate. Yet there's something deeply human about Japan's quiet defiance. Its people aren't giving up, they're adapting in their own way. Robots harvest rice, smart toilets measure health, empty schools become community centres. It's not the rebirth of growth, it's the slow art of endurance. Perhaps in a strange way, Japan is teaching the world a new kind of survival, one that values stability over speed, quality over quantity, harmony over expansion. So what comes next? Will Japan find a way to reinvent itself? Or will it fade gracefully into history, remembered as the country that flew too close to perfection? Because every empire falls, but few fall so quietly. And maybe that silence, that calm acceptance of decline, is the most Japanese thing of all.